Every sunset is an opportunity to reset. Good evening, everyone. With great joy and immense exaltation, I extend my warm welcome to all dignitaries, guests, and delegates present here for the webinar series organized by Diksha e-Learning in association with Ayurveda College, Coimbatore. In today's session, we will be discussing about taking the ancient road to inguinal hernia in COVID era. To invoke the Almighty, let's begin with a prayer song. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Guru Me Deva Sarvakareshu Sarvata. Before starting the session, I would like to go through a few of the basic instructions to be followed throughout the session. For uninterrupted class session, use laptop with high-speed internet connection. Please make sure your microphone is on mute to have a disturbance-free session. In case of any disruption, please check your internet connection firstly, and if the problem is within our network connection, kindly raise the issue in the chat box. Filling your full name is to be appreciated. Any question can be posted in the chat box. Questions raised will be cleared at the end of the session. Next, I would like to invite
Yeah.
Dr. Hita A, Assistant Professor, Department of Shalya Tantra, Ayurveda College, Coimbatore, to deliver the welcome address.
Good evening, Ananda. I heartily welcome you all to today's webinar session. As you all know, today's session is on the topic taking the ancient road to inguinal hernia in COVID era by Shukran Sharma, Assistant Professor, Department of Shalyatantra, Jammu Institute of Ayurveda and Research. I extend a warm word of welcome to you, sir, for accepting our invitation and for being with us here today, and to share the most relevant topic of current scenario, where Shailendra Department as a whole is being recognized for the contributions of surgeries by Acharya Sushruta. Hope your valuable experiences and views on the vast clinical area of inguinal hernia will be enlightening to all of us. We are all delighted to listen to your words, sir. On the behalf of Ayurveda College, Coimbatore, I welcome you all the delegates to the today's session. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
ma'am. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Sukrant Sharma. Dr. Sukrant Sharma completed his BA MS from Dayanand Ayurvedic College, Jalandhar, and MS from SDM College of Ayurveda and Hospital, Udupi, Karnataka, in the academic year 2013-16. He is well experienced in various surgical and parasurgical procedures. After his post-graduation, pursuing an academic career and currently working as assistant professor in PG department of Shalya Tantra, Jammu Institute of Ayurveda and Research, and has been co-guiding many students in their dissertation. He has published 15 papers on clinical and experimental studies in national and international journals. He has presented scientific papers in various national and international seminars and has been invited as a resource person to various CME seminars and webinars. We are very proud to have you here on the session today, sir. Now, without any further ado, we will turn the time over to respected Dr. Sukrant Sharma, sir, to enlighten our minds with his knowledge. So you can start.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. A very good evening to all of you. As we know, the topic for today is taking the ancient road to inguinal hernia in COVID era. I welcome you all for this presentation. Next slide, please. Before beginning, I would like to pay my obedience to the holy feet of Lord Manjunatha and my teachers, my former HOD of my PG department, Dr. K. R. Ramchandra sir, and my guide, Dr. Muralidhar Sharma sir. Without their guidance, I would not have been able to be what I am. Next slide. So to begin with the introduction of the hernias. So what is hernia basically? Hernia is an abnormal protrusion of a part or whole of the viscus through an abnormal opening in the wall of the cavity which contains it. As you can see in the diagram on the right side of your screen, there you can see that a loop of intestine is protruding through the abdominal musculature. So this is the herniation of the intestine into the abdominal musculature. So whenever any hollow viscus, either completely or its part, intrudes or protrudes into an potential opening or an abnormal opening, that is called as the hernia. Hernia are classified in many ways. One of the most common classification is based upon the anatomical location where the hernia is located. So the most common one is the inguinal hernia, which constitutes about 75% of the cases. Globally, every year 20 million patients are operated for the inguinal hernia, followed by the femoral hernia, which constitutes 17% of the patients, umbilical hernia 8.5%. Incisional hernia is basically not defined on the site, which is, it is not classified on the site where it is located. It is just a complication of a surgery, so its incidence is not known exactly. And 1.5% cases are rare hernias, which can be epigastric hernia, lumbar hernia, or the obturator hernia. Next slide. So coming to the general etiology of the hernias, it can be categorized in the two main headings. First is the weakness of the abdominal musculature, and second is the increased abdominal pressure. So weakness of the abdominal musculature can be a congenital weakness, as in the case of the presence of the persistent processus vaginalis. Processus vaginalis is basically the layer of the peritoneum which comes into the inguinal canal and the scrotum along with the descent of the testis. Usually this processus vaginalis obliterates after the descent of the testis is complete, but sometimes this processus vaginalis may not fuse completely. Usually the fusion takes place at three places, which we'll be discussing in the later slides. The second cause is the patent canal of Nuck, especially in the females, which causes the indirect inguinal hernia. Or third is as in seen in the case of the umbilical hernia, where there is incomplete obliteration of the umbilicus, which may lead to the infantile umbilical hernia. Second is the acquired weakness of the abdominal musculature. The most and the foremost reason is the obesity, where the excessive fat in the abdomen causes the weakness of the abdominal musculature. Usually the common sense says that if there is more fat, the patient will be having more strength to the anterior abdominal wall. But this is not the case, where the pressure of the fat causes the degeneration because of its pressure, and also the fat globules enter between the muscle fibers, thus tearing them apart. So it causes the weakness or potential weakness, which may cause the hernia. Second is the muscle weakness following the multiple repeated pregnancy, where the gravity uterus, as it increases in the size, can cause the weakness of the abdominal musculature, acquired weakness of the abdominal musculature. Then third is the surgical incisions, where it may lead to the division of the nerve fibers and may cause the weakness. The most commonly encountered complications in the case of the appendectomies, where if the ilioinguinal nerve is damaged, which is a motor nerve, can cause the weakness of the posterior inguinal canal and may lead to the kind of direct inguinal hernias. And also incisional hernias may develop through the weakened abdominal muscles following the previous surgeries. And most of the times it is because of the earlier post-operative infections or the excessive fat which can predispose to the incisional hernias. Then second is the classification, or the second group of the etiology is where there is increased intra-abdominal pressure. The most common is the whooping cough in the children, chronic cough as in the case of the tuberculosis, and the bronchitis, because if the patient is coughing too much, there also the pressure of the diaphragm increases the intra-abdominal pressure and may cause the acquired kind of the inguinal hernias. Then third is the bladder neck obstruction, where there may be difficulty while micturating and the patient may strain, and it will lead to the increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. BPH causes the increased intra-abdominal pressure also, because the patient will be having difficulty while micturating. Then straining during the weightlifting. Mostly if we go by the occupation, the laborers are more prone to this inguinal hernias because they do the strenuous work, and while doing the strenuous work, there is increased intra-abdominal pressure. That is why you see most of the weightlifters or people going to gym wearing the belt. Actually, the belt has to be worn in a way that it covers the inguinal region, so that if the intra-abdominal pressure is increased, the pressure of the belt from the outside will suffice the increased intra-abdominal pressure. Then is the constipation. A patient who is having chronic constipation, who has to strain to evacuate his stools, may acquire this intra-abdominal weakness, weakness of the anterior abdominal wall, and may get the inguinal hernia. And similarly, the repeated pregnancies may also increases the intra-abdominal pressure and causes the various kind of the hernias, especially the inguinal hernia. Next slide. So coming to the pathology, the hernia basically consists of the three parts: the sac, the contents of the sac, and the coverings of the sac. I would like to draw your attention towards the diagrams on the right side of your screen. The sac is basically a pouch of the peritoneum which comes through the abdominal musculature. As you can see in the diagram, the sac contains the contents. So it is the pouch of the peritoneum because the viscus is lying inside the abdomen. It will be having the layers of the visceral and the parietal peritoneum over it. So as the viscus will try to protrude through the opening, it will drag the layer of the peritoneum along with it. And this layer of peritoneum is called as the pouch of the peritoneum. If you look keenly towards the other diagram on to the extreme right of your screens, the pouch contains, or the sac contains, various parts. That is the mouth, the neck, body, and the fundus. Mouth is basically defined through which we put something in. So here the mouth is that part through which the sac protrudes into the abdominal wall. So it is the opening through which the contents enter the sac. Then is the neck. Neck is the most constricted part of the sac, and this is the part which passes through the abdominal musculature. You can see on the diagram comparatively left side that the part which is passing through the abdominal muscles is the sac, and it is the neck, and it is the most constricted part. Most of the time strangulation occurs at this part. Then is the body, and the last is the fundus, which is the most redundant part of the sac. Then next is the contents of the sac. The viscus which lies within the sac of the hernia is called the content of the hernia, and depending upon what is the content, the hernias are classified differently. If the content is omentum, the hernia is called as an omentocele or an epiplocele. If the content is the loop of the intestine, it is called as an enterocele. If the content is the portion of the circumference of the intestine, it is called as the Richter's hernia. These are rare kind of hernias, the most commonly being the omentocele or epiplocele and the enterocele. If ovary may also be the content, and the content may also be a Meckel's diverticulum, where it is called as a Litter's hernia, or if there may be two loops of the small intestines in a single sac in the manner of W, which is called as the Madel's hernia. And then there is a fluid which is slightly present in normal hernias, but if there is ascites associated with it, then the volume will be more. Similarly, if the fluid is blood stain, then it may suggest the strangulation. And most of the time, intraoperatively, we perform this diagnostic test to look whether the content has strangulated by aspiring the fluid from the sac and look for its color. If it is dark colored, blood colored, then we mostly suspect the strangulation, or if it is a clear fluid, then we can proceed comfortably. Then is the covering of the sac. The coverings are all the layers of the abdominal wall starting from the skin and going inside, which covers the hernial sac. That includes skin, the campus fascia, carpus fascia, external oblique muscle, internal oblique muscle, transversalis abdominis from the outside to the inside. Next slide, please. Then this is the another classification, or you can say the clinical classification of the hernias. So this is basically general classification which applies to almost all kind of the hernias. We'll be discussing in more relation with the inguinal hernia in this presentation. First is the reducible or reducibility. It is the one of the two most characteristic feature of the hernia along with the cuff impulse. First is the reducibility and second is the cuff impulse. So what basically is reducibility? Supposingly a patient comes to you with this swelling in the inguinal region and you suspect it to be inguinal hernia. So if you ask the patient to lie down and if the swelling disappears, then it is called as the reducibility. That means the contents which have come into the inguinal canal have gone back into the abdomen. So this going back of the contents from the inguinal canal or from the scrotum back into the abdomen is called as the reducibility. It can be spontaneously reducible where the patient lies and all of a sudden the swelling has vanished, or it is manually reducible where the patient himself or herself or the surgeon reduces back the contents into the abdominal wall. The procedure by which the surgeon reduces the contents back into the abdominal wall, it is called as the texis, where the fundus of the sac is gently pressed into the abdominal canal after relaxing the pillars of the external or the superficial inguinal ring. Then second is the irreducibility. So, sorry, I missed the point. Other important feature, which is the cuff impulse. Cuff impulse is that impulse once the hernia has been reduced and the patient is asked to cuff. As the patient cuffs, there will be increase in the intra-abdominal pressure and you will see a spike or a swelling appearing with the bouts of the cuff. That is called as the cuff impulse. Cuff impulse is also a sign of a reducible hernia because irreducible hernia will not elicit the cuff impulse. Then second is the irreducibility. As the name itself suggests, when the contents cannot be moved back into the abdominal cavity or the cavity through which it has come out, it is called as the irreducibility. There are various causes for this irreducibility. The various causes can be categorized as the additions. Addition is the major cause. This addition may occur with the contents to each other. That means the contents, the two loops of the intestine, if you can remember from the previous photograph, the two loops of the intestine may get adhered to each other, or the additions can be between the contents to the sac, or also if there is a sliding hernia, or if the neck is too narrow. That means once the content has come into the sac and after that the neck has become too narrow, which does not allow the movement of the contents backwards. Also, if the omentum is present, because the omentum is difficult to reduce because of its sheer size, then it also causes the irreducibility. Or if there is a massive hernia inside the scrotum, which is also called as the scrotal abdomen, it becomes irreducible. Irreducibility is also most commonly seen in the femoral and the umbilical hernias. Then next is the obstructed or incarcerated types of the hernias. Obstructed hernia or the incarcerated hernia means irreducibility along with the intestinal obstruction. Intestinal obstruction is defined as the failure of the contents of intestines to move from proximal to the distal. That means the movement of the contents of the intestine from the proximal part to the distal part is arrested. So once the intestinal obstruction and irreducibility occurs simultaneously, it is called as the obstructed hernia. So in this, what basically happens is the portion of the colon, which is the content of the sac, is blocked with the feces because the patient was having long-standing constipation. So these feces get adhered or blocked in the sac and it causes the further progression of the contents from the proximal to the distal side. And this can be ascertained if you put the index of your finger over the hernial sac, you can see it indenting over there. So it is called as putty-like feeling over the sac. So the features of the obstructed hernia are, as we have discussed, because it is an irreducible hernia, the cuff impulse will not be present and the hernia will be irreducible. But here the patient will not complain of any pain. The hernia will not be tender. That means on palpitation, the patient will not have any kind of pain and the hernia will be most importantly lax. It will not be tense hernia. the hernia will be lax, and also there will be the systemic symptoms of the intestinal obstruction. Then next is the strangulation. This is very important, and it is a kind of surgical emergency where there is obstruction along with the, there will be irreducibility obstruction, that is the intestinal obstruction, along with the arrest of the blood supply to the contents. That means the contents within the sac will be having compromised blood supply. This will be because the neck has become too narrow and is compromising the blood flow in and out from the sac. First of all, the venous supply will be altered, and then the arterial supply will be altered. If this is not corrected in the time, it may lead to the gangrene and ultimately the perforation. In this case, the patient will complain of pain, vomiting, and pain is basically located to the site of the hernia. Whereas in the case of an internal strangulation, in the case of internal hernia, the pain will be located to the umbilicus. Initially, the pain will be localized to the site of the hernia, but later on, with the involvement of the parietal peritoneum, whole of the abdomen, the pain will spread to the whole of the abdomen, and vomiting will become forcible and the frequent. Earlier, the vomiting may be a sign of the, may be a reflex of the pain, but later on, the vomiting becomes forcible and frequent. And if the strangulation is not relieved in time and the paroxysm of the pain continues, ultimately it will lead to the gangrene and paralytic illness. At this moment, the pain may vanish on its own, and this should not be a relieving sign to the treating clinician, because it is an ominous sign which suggests strangulated hernia and ultimately the perforation. If you examine the patient will look seriously ill. The hernia will be tense and tender. That means if you try to palpate, the patient will wince in the pain, and the consistency of the hernia will be tense. The hernia will be irreducible, and if you ask the patient to cough, there will be no cough impulse because the hernia has not been previously reduced. Also, there will be the features of the acute intestinal obstruction if it is a case of the enterocele. That means if it is a case where the intestines are the contents of the sac, there will be other features of the intestinal obstruction. That means there will be an absolute constipation. Initially, the constipation, initially, the sorry, there will be absolute constipation along with the failure to pass the even flat. Then last is the inflamed hernia. As the name suggests, if the hernia becomes inflamed, either from the outside because of an ill-fitting truss, or from the inside if the content is an inflamed fallopian tube, or the patient is having salpingitis, then it is called as the inflamed hernia. Sometimes appendicitis may also come along with the inflamed hernia. The only differentiating clinical feature of an inflamed hernia from a strangulated hernia will be that in this the hernia is not tense and it is not associated with the features of the intestinal obstruction. In the case of the strangulated hernia, the hernia will be tense and will be associated with the features of the intestinal obstruction. But in the case of an inflamed hernia, the hernia will not be tense and will not be associated with the features of the intestinal obstruction. Next slide, please. So knowledge of hernia cannot be obtained without the knowledge of the anatomy. So here the anatomy of our consideration is the anatomy of the inguinal canal. As you know, the inguinal hernia is basically the protrusion of the contents of the abdomen through the inguinal region of the abdominal wall. So we'll be discussing the anatomy of the inguinal canal in the detail. So what is inguinal region? It is a weak part of the abdominal wall because of the presence of the inguinal canal. Sorry, it is the weak part of the abdominal wall because of the presence of the inguinal canal. And this inguinal canal is a triangular slit which is almost horizontal in direction and extends from the inner half of the inguinal ligament. It starts or commences at the deep inguinal ring, and at the, you can see in the photograph, it starts at the deep inguinal ring. The green part in the left side of the photograph, it is the inguinal canal. It commences at the deep ring or the internal ring and finishes at the, or opens up at the superficial ring or the external ring. In infants, the superficial and the deep ring is almost superimposed. The length of this inguinal canal is usually 3.75 centimeter or half inch, and it is directed downwards and midly from the deep ring to the superficial ring. This canal is basically the way through which the intestines, which developed in the abdomen in the intrauterine life, descends from the abdomen to the scrotum. So basically it is a pathway. So that is why it is having innate innate tendency to cause the herniation. The deep inguinal ring, as you can see, is an opening in the fascia transversalis, which is 1.25 centimeter above the mid-inguinal point. That is the point between the anterior superior iliac spine and the pubic tubercle. It is not on the same line which joins the pubic tubercle and the anterior superior iliac spine. It is on the midpoint and 1.25 centimeter above the mid-inguinal point. That has to be remembered. And this anatomy is very important for the clinical examination purpose and for surgical purpose. Then is the superficial inguinal ring. It is an interval in the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle, and it is situated just above and lateral to the crest of the pubis. The long axis is oblique, which corresponds to the course of the fibers of the external oblique aponeurosis. Then the next slide, please. So you can see the photograph on the left side. This photograph depicts the boundaries of the inguinal canal. Anteriorly, the inguinal canal is bounded throughout its whole length with the skin, the superficial fascia, the aponeurosis of the external oblique, and in its lateral one-third, there are the fleshy fibers of the origin of the internal oblique. Posteriorly, the transversalis fascia along the whole length of the canal separated from the extraperitoneal connective tissue and the peritoneum. And in the medial half, there is conjoint tendon, which is a combination of the internal oblique and the transversus muscle and the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. Above, as you can see, there is the, which is also written as roof in the photograph, is the arched fibers of the internal oblique and the transversus abdominis before they fuse to form the conjoint tendon, and below or the floor is formed by the grouped upper surface of the inguinal ligament and its union with the fascia transversalis. The contents of this inguinal canal is the ilioinguinal nerve in both the sexes and is particularly seen in the medial part of the canal. In the case of the males, the spermatic cord along with its covering passes through the in this inguinal canal, and in female, the round ligament of the uterus and the remnant portion of the processus vaginalis passes through this inguinal canal. Next slide, please. So the inguinal hernia, depending upon the anatomical location of the herniation of the contents, can be divided into two: indirect inguinal hernia and the direct inguinal hernia. In the indirect inguinal hernia, the contents of the abdomen enter into the inguinal canal through the deep inguinal ring and traverses the whole of the length of the inguinal canal to come out through the superficial inguinal ring and ultimately descend into the scrotum. And this type of inguinal hernia is more common than the direct inguinal hernia. In the case of the direct inguinal hernia, the contents protrudes through the posterior wall of the inguinal canal, medial to the inferior epigastric vessels. This is very important surgically also to note the position of the contents in relation to the inferior epigastric vessels. If the contents are medial to the inferior epigastric vessels, then the mostly hernia is kind of a direct hernia. If they are lateral to the inferior epigastric vessel, the hernia is the indirect kind of the hernia. So I repeat, the indirect hernia is that in which the contents of the abdomen enters the inguinal canal through the deep inguinal ring, comes out through the superficial inguinal ring after traversing the whole length, and ultimately it may descend into the scrotum. And in case of the direct hernia, the contents protrude through the posterior wall of the inguinal canal, medial to the inferior epigastric vessels. That is through the Hazelbeck's triangle. If you can go 2 slides previously, I will just describe what is Hazelbeck's triangle. 2 slides previous, please. Back side, ma'am. Earlier slides. Anatomy of the inguinal canal. Ma'am, previous. Yes, this slide. On the right side of the diagram, on the right diagram, you can see a triangular area highlighted by the yellow pen. This is called as the Hasselbeck's triangle, and this is the anatomical location of the direct inguinal hernia. As you can see, this is basically a photograph of the left-sided inguinal canal. Here you can see the medial wall is formed by the outer border of the rectus abdominis muscles. Laterally, there is the red line, which you can see, or the lead, this red artery which is passing. It is the inferior epigastric vessels, which is laterally, and then the lower border or below it is the medial part of the inguinal ligament. So this is called as the Hasselbeck's triangle, where the medial border is formed by the outer border of the rectus abdominal muscle. Laterally, it is bounded by the inferior epigastric vessels, and below it is bounded by the middle part of the inguinal ligament. So if on surgery, you can see the hernial contents coming from the lateral part, that is, if you see lateral of the contents coming from the lateral part of this inferior epigastric vessel, then it is a kind of indirect hernia. Or if you see the contents coming through the medial part, then it is the direct kind of the inguinal hernia. This has to be kept in mind. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so coming to the differentiation between the indirect and the direct inguinal hernia, this indirect hernia is of three types depending upon the extent of the hernia. As we know that this inguinal canal has a basic role of allowing the passage of the testis from the dorsum of the abdomen, where they develop in the intrauterine life, to the scrotum. So as the testis descend along with them, they drag the processus vaginalis, that is the layer of the peritoneum. What happens usually, this processus vaginalis fuses at 3 points. The first fusion is at the level of the deep inguinal ring. The second fusion is in between the superficial inguinal ring and the deep inguinal ring. And third fusion is just above the testis. But if this fusion fails, or if all the three fusions does not take place, depending upon the extent or the side where the fusion has taken place, this indirect inguinal hernia can have three presentation. First is the bubinocele. In this, the hernia is limited to the inguinal canal and processus vaginalis is closed at the superficial inguinal ring. That means the deep inguinal ring, processus vaginalis, has failed to fuse. So there is a free communication between the inguinal canal and the deep inguinal ring with the abdomen. So contents, if there is an increased intra-abdominal pressure or other pathologies playing in, the contents can enter the inguinal canal through the deep inguinal ring, but cannot go forward and becomes entrapped in between the inguinal canal. So it is called as the bubinocele. And this kind of hernia presents as an inguinal swelling. But if the processus vaginalis is closed at its lower point, just above the epididymis, that means just above the testis, there is fusion, but the fusion has failed to occur at the superficial inguinal ring and the deep inguinal ring, then the hernia may come and may reach up to the upper limits of the testis. That means it will not descend to the root of the scrotum, but you will feel the hernia just above the testis. That means the testis can be felt separated from the hernial sac. So this kind of hernia is called as the funicular hernia, and most of these hernias occur in the adults. In this case of the hernia, there will be a long-standing history, whereas in the case of a bubinocele, there will be a short history. That means the duration of the onset of the swelling will be short, and the majority of the victims are the young adults. Whereas in the case of the funicular hernia, because it is having a long kind of history, there will be elderly people or the senior adults in this category. Then last is the complete or vaginal or scrotal hernia, where there is no fusion at all. That means there will be no fusion just above the testis at the level of the epididymis. So the hernial contents can descend to the root of the scrotum. So it is called as the complete scrotal or complete vaginal hernia, where the contents descend to the root of the scrotum because of the failure of any of the fusion, because there will be a free connection between the scrotum and the abdominal cavity. So the contents can freely come from the abdominal cavity to the scrotum. So this is the indirect inguinal hernia. But because in the case of direct inguinal hernia, the contents are not entering the inguinal canal, they are just protruding behind the inguinal from the posterior wall. So the hernia will be limited just to the superficial inguinal ring. It will not enter the scrotum. So if you look at the shape, the indirect hernia, the complete indirect hernia will attain a pyriform kind of shape, whereas the direct hernia will attain a globular shape because it will not descend into the scrotum. Next slide. So next, coming to the clinical features, age. If we look at the age, as the indirect hernia is a kind of congenital hernia, the most of the patients which will be coming to your clinic will be children and young adults. Whereas in the case of direct hernia, which is a kind of acquired hernia due to the weakness of the posterior inguinal canal, the patients will be elderly, or in the older age, the patient will visit the clinician. And if you ask the occupation of the history, most of the patients will be having the history of strenuous work. That means the most of the patients will be laborer, those who are lifting weights, or those conditions or those occupation which requires great strain, which causes the increased intra-abdominal pressure. And if there is an already underlying weakness or the patient is emaciated, then they are more prone to the these kind of the hernias. Then next is coming to the symptomatology. If the most common symptom which the patient will give at the onset or before the onset of the or the visible swelling will be pain. The pain will be kind of dragging pain, and most of the time there will not be any swelling which will be visible, and such condition is called as the tendency to herniate, where the patient will have just pain because of the contents dragging into the inguinal canal. The pain may be also referred to as kind of discomfort which get worse as the day progress, because when the patient is in supine position or lying or resting at the night, the contents will go back, whichsoever or what extent they have entered the inguinal canal, they will go back. But as the day passes and the person continue with his daily activities, and if he or she does the strenuous work, then increased intra-abdominal pressure will push the contents into the inguinal canal. So as the day passes, the patient will have a pain which will get worse with the progression of the day. Also, the pain is because of the dragging of the mesentery, which causes the pain in the epigastric region. The mesentery of the intestine, if it gets dragged, causes the pain which is referred to the epigastric region, and sometimes it can be misleading to the clinician if the clinical examination is not taken properly. That is why we say if there is a patient of acute abdomen, you must examine the patient from the nipple to the knees. That is the importance of this quotation. Then the lump, it is the most common presenting symptom where the patient complains of the lump in the inguinal region. The patient says that he or she has a swelling in the groin. Next is the systemic symptoms. Systemic symptoms are mostly seen in the patients those who have accompanying intestinal obstruction or the this obstructed kind of inguinal hernia. The patient will complain of the colicky abdominal pain. The patient may complain of vomiting. There will be abdominal distension, and if there is intestinal obstruction, there will be absolute constipation. That means there will be failure to pass the feces as well as the fecal material. Sometimes the vomitus, if you keenly ask the patient the nature of the vomitus, the patient may tell that the vomitus has some greenish tinge to it or has the smell of the feces. If the patient complains of the smell of the feces, it is an ominous sign which suggests the gangrene of the intestine. Then other complaints, as we have read in the causes of the hernia, the patient may complain of chronic cough as if he or she is tubercular, or in the case of the males, the patient may complains of the difficulty in passing the urine if he is having BPH, or the patient may give the history of uh, constipation. So these all other complaints should be asked and considered before you take the surgical step of the correction. And then is the past history. You should always ask the past history to the patient if he or she has undergone any surgery which you may miss at the sign at the initial onset of the treatment, because if the patient has undergone the appendectomy, then you may have a guess that the patient is probably having the direct kind of the inguinal hernia. Because of the division of the ilioinguinal nerve, the patient may develop the direct kind of the inguinal hernia. Then clinical examination or the local examination should be done. Sorry, next slide, please. So the local examination, it should be done in both standing and supine position. Standing position is preferred first before taking the patient to the supine position, because in this position you may be able to see the hernia, but as you say the patient to lie down, the hernia may reduce on its own. So that is why the first standing position examination is preferred. In this, the position and the extent of the hernia is located or noted. The hernial extent can be from the deep inguinal ring to the scrotum in the case of the complete vaginal or the scrotal hernia. You have to note down the position and the extent, that is from the direct from the deep inguinal ring to the root of the scrotum. The next clinical sign which is performed is the to get above the swelling. This is a very important clinical sign which differentiates a inguinoscrotal swelling from a complete or the total scrotal swelling. In this examination, the root of the scrotum is held between the thumb in front and other fingers behind, and there is an attempt made to reach above the swelling. That is, you are trying to meet your thumb and the fingers. If there is nothing between the thumb and the fingers, if you can meet both your thumb and the fingers, this suggests that it is a purely scrotal swelling because nothing is coming between your thumb and the fingers. But if it is an inguinoscrotal swelling, that is a indirect hernia, then there will be the contents or the hernial contents which will not be allowing your fingers and thumb to meet. So this is test is set to get above the swelling. As in the case of the hydrocele, your fingers and your thumb will meet. But if it is a inguinal hernia, a kind of direct inguinal hernia, then your thumb and the fingers will not meet. So this test is called as the getting above the swelling. Then is the consistency. This is an also important test which can give a clue to the clinician that what he or she should expect in the surgery or the contents to be the surgery. So if it is an enterocele, that is if the contents is the intestine, then the nature will or the consistency will be elastic. But if it contains omentum or if it is an epiplocele, the swelling will feel doughy, that is just like a dough, and it will be granular, just like the omentum. But if the hernia feels tense and tender, then as we have discussed, it will be a strangulated hernia. So it is an important test because if it is an enterocele, then you have to perform the surgery very carefully to avoid any perforation of the intestine. And similarly, if the swelling is tense and tender, then you have to perform quick surgery because it may be a strangulated hernia. Then next is the impulse on cuffing, which we have discussed, that after reduction, this impulse of cuffing has to be elicited only after the hernia has been reduced, because if the hernia is irreducible, then this impulse on cuffing will not be appreciable. In this, the patient is made to lie and the hernia is reduced either by patient himself or by the treating clinician, where by taxis the hernia is reduced or given back to the abdominal cavity, and then the patient is asked to cuff. As the patient cuffs, because of the increase in the intra-abdominal pressure, there will be an impulse which will be visible. At moments, this impulse is not so great to be visible to the naked eyes. So in that case, we put our index finger over the deep inguinal ring, our middle finger over the superficial inguinal ring, and our ring finger over the femoral ring. And then we ask the patient to cuff. So if it is a case of a indirect hernia, you will feel the impulse on your index finger because that finger is just opposite the deep inguinal ring. And if it is a case of direct hernia, your finger will be on superficial inguinal ring and you will feel the impulse over the superficial inguinal ring as the patient cuffs. And if it is a case of femoral hernia, then you will feel the impulse on your ring finger, which will be just opposite to the great saphenous opening or the femoral opening, which is lateral to the pubic crest or the pubic symphysis. Then next is the reducibility, which we have discussed, whether you can reduce the contents or not. If you can reduce the contents, then the hernia is reducible, and if you cannot reduce the contents, the hernia is irreducible. Then next test is the invagination test. This test is also performed after reduction. This test cannot be performed if the hernia is irreducible. So after reduction, in this test, the little finger should be inserted from the bottom of the scrotum and then gently pushed upwards and rotated inwards to enter the superficial inguinal ring. That means from the root of the scrotum, you have to enter the superficial inguinal ring and then to rotate your finger. The feeling at this point will be of a triangular slit of the superficial inguinal ring, which will just admit your tip of the finger. And you will then ask the patient to cuff. and feel the impulse. If the impulse will be on the tip of the finger, that means the contents are coming from upwards, directly coming from the deep inguinal ring. But if it will be on the pulp of the finger, then it is coming from behind the inguinal canal, or the then it will be a kind of in direct hernia, because the contents are coming from the posterior inguinal wall. They are not coming inside the inguinal canal. So it is a test to differentiate the direct hernia from the indirect hernia, where in the case of indirect hernia, the impulse will be felt on the tip of the finger, and in the case of a direct hernia, the impulse will be felt on the pulp of the finger. And then last is the ring occlusion test. This test also should be performed after the reduction of the hernia. Here, the thumb of the examiner is pressed over the deep inguinal ring, that is 1.5 inch or 3.75 centimeter above the, 1.75 centimeter above the mid inguinal point. So as you occlude the deep inguinal ring, you ask the patient to cough. So if the patient is having a direct hernia, you will see the bulge medial to the occluding thumb. That means on the medial side of the thumb, you will see the cough impulse coming. But if it is a case of indirect hernia, there will be no visible swelling, because you are directly occluding the site of the entrance of the contents into the indirect hernia, that is the deep inguinal ring. So here you will not feel any kind of impulse coming on, or you may feel the impulse directly onto your thumb. There will be no visible impulse seen in the case of the ring occlusion test. Next slide, please. So next is the treatment of the inguinal hernia. So this is a very bold line, that operation is undoubtedly the treatment of the choice of the inguinal hernia. That means any patient who is fit for the anesthesia and who does not have any contraindication to the induction of the anesthesia should be operated for the hernia. And it applies to all the kinds of the anatomical hernias, because every hernia has a tendency to get strangulate, and strangulation may cause the further increase in the morbidity and the mortality. But still, there are certain conservative methods, and then there are the surgical methods. So we have to make the choice when to choose the conservative treatment and when to directly proceed for the surgery. So conservative treatment has 2 points. First is the no treatment, and second is the truss. So no treatment should be done in a patient who is having severe general ill health. For example, a patient comes to you with a COVID, with having massive involvement of the lungs. So if that patient is having hernia, you are not going to operate on his hernia first. Or if a patient who is having a malignancy, advanced malignancy, then also if you are expecting a short life expectancy, then no treatment should be done. Or directly in those patients who refuse the surgery, you cannot force a patient for the surgery. So these are the two indications of the no treatment. Then next is the truss. So the truss, it does not cure the hernia, but exception is of the newborns. In newborns, if you can prevent the hernia, as in the case of the umbilical hernia, from coming out, that means if you can keep the hernia reduced and by a truss, then within a few months time that hernia may get cured. But not in the case of the inguinal hernia. Here it is to prevent the hernia to come out of the superficial inguinal ring. That means it is just a modality to postpone the surgery till the patient becomes fit for the anesthesia. But it has its own dangers, which is adhesions, obstructions, and strangulation, because adhesion can cause obstruction and ultimately obstruction can cause the strangulation. So trust should not be preferred for a long duration of the time. Next slide, please. Then the operative treatment. Operative treatment of all the hernias can be categorized into three basic surgical steps that may have certain modifications based upon the site of the hernia. So first is the herniotomy. As the name says, otomy, that means the opening of the sac. So here herniotomy is done in mostly in the case of the infants and the children who have a preformed sac, or in the case of the young adults with a very good inguinal musculature. In this, a transfixation of the sac of the neck is done, followed by the excision. That means you have to open the sac, you have to inspect the sac, followed by the excision of the redundant part after reducing the contents back into the inguinal canal. Then next is the herniorrhaphy. Herniorrhaphy, it consists of the herniotomy with the repair of the posterior wall of the inguinal canal by opposing the conjoint tendons to the inguinal ligament. In the case of the inguinal hernia, here first you have to perform the herniotomy, you have to open the sac, you have to inspect the contents, reduce the contents, transfix ligation of the sac at the neck, excision of the redundant part, and then followed by the repair of the posterior wall using non-absorbable sutures. This is done in the case of all indirect hernias except in children where they have a good muscular tensile strength, and in adult patients those who have muscle tone which is quite good, where there is no need for external uh, uh, measures like mesh or the fascias. Then last is the hernioplasty, which includes herniotomy along with the reinforced repair of the posterior wall using autologous and the heterogeneous material. Here, after performing the herniotomy, autogeneous material like the fascias from the lateral side of the thigh can be used, or a heterogeneous material like polypropylene mesh, which is the most commonly used material for the hernioplasty is used. Next slide, please. So this slide deals with the surgical procedure or the surgical steps of the hernia surgery. As you can see, the incision is made 1 inch above and parallel to the medial 2/3 of the inguinal ligament. That means from the deep inguinal ring to the superficial inguinal ring, that is almost on the inguinal canal. And the subcutaneous tissue is cut along the line of the skin incision. That is the campus fascia and the scarpus fascia, along with the subcutaneous tissue, is incised in the line of the layer. Then after this, the incision is deepened to the external oblique aponeurosis, which is cut up to the superficial inguinal ring. As you can see in the photograph, that the external oblique aponeurosis has been inside to expose the spermatic cord. After the spermatic cord is exposed, we have to perform the search of the sac, which is done by incising the cremasteric fascia and holding or dissecting free the sac from the spermatic fascia and the cremasteric fascia. Next slide, please. In this side, you can see that the spermatic cord is incised to separate the cremasteric fascia from the sac. The sac is classified or made visible by its pearly whitish fibers and pearlish whitish color, and is held from the fundus. After holding from the fundus with the help of the artery forceps, the sac is incised and open. It is inspected. If the contents are present inside, those contents are reduced back, and then the transfix ligation is done at the neck of the sac. The redundant portion, that is the portion which is distal to your sutures, is excised. Next slide. After excising the excessive portion, this completes the herniotomy. Here, if the patient is a child or a young children, then this finishes the surgery. After this, the layer by layer closure is done. This is called as the herniotomy. And if following this herniotomy, the posterior wall is reinforced by suturing the lower margins of the internal oblique muscles and transversus abdominis conjoint tendon to the inner margin of the inguinal ligament. That is, the inguinal ligament is sutured with 3 to 5 interrupted sutures with the conjoint tendon and the lower margins of the internal oblique and transversus muscle. It is called as the strengthening of the posterior wall by the Bassini repairs. This is the procedure of the herniorrhaphy, where the posterior wall is reinforced by the 3 to 5 interrupted sutures using non-absorbable sutures. You can see in your photograph on that side that the triple layer superiorly consisting of the transversalis fascia, transversus abdominis, and internal oblique is sutured to the inguinal ligament on the other side behind the spermatic cord. The medial most suture should pass through the periosteum of the pubic bone or the pubic tubercle, so that the direct hernia does not take place, because direct hernia takes place at this side. So if the muscles are sutured with the pubic periosteum of the pubic tubercle, this will reduce the future chances of the direct hernia. Next slide. So this slide is depicting the procedure of the hernioplasty, where instead of suturing the conjoint tendon with the inguinal ligament, the gap is obliterated by a polypropylene mesh. That means the gap or the weakness of the posterior wall is reinforced by the heterogeneous material, which is the polypropylene mesh, which is sutured to the edges of the or the margins of the muscles located on its sides. On the medial side, it is the conjoint tendon and the lower margins of the internal oblique muscles, and on the lateral side, it is the inguinal ligament through which it is attached. Again, here the medial suture has to be passed through the periosteum of the pubic crest. So this is the hernioplasty. Next slide. So now coming to the topic major, why we should look at the Ayurveda in the COVID times. Next slide. So I repeat that undoubtedly the choice of the treatment for the hernias is the surgery, but this emerging scenario has given us a further guidelines from the various global surgical associations to look for the alternative to the surgery or to postpone the surgery because of the following reasons. Because elective surgical procedures carry a varying amount of risk to the surgeon, the entire OT team, and also to the patient. So you have to choose wisely between the surgical emergencies or the elective surgery. The American Association for the Surgeons has clearly mentioned that we should consider the non-operative management whenever it is clinically appropriate for the patient. So if you can see that the patient is not having strangulated, and if by various means you can reduce the possibility of strangulation in the immediate future, then you can proceed with this according to the guidelines of the American College of the Surgeons. Next slide. Similarly, the British College of Surgeons has also notified that to consider the non-operative management wherever it is necessary for the patients. And among these, what have those conditions on the right side have been mentioned, where you should immediately perform the surgery, which is the bowel perforation, intestinal ischemia, or the closed loop obstruction. That comes under the spectrum of the strangulated hernia. So if now also in these times also, if a patient of strangulated hernia comes to you, you have to operate it. Whereas if it is a non-complicated hernia, you can continue with the conservative management. Next slide. So now this is a beautiful shloka by Acharya Sushruta while he was describing the various types of disorders in Vyadhi Samudeshi Adhyay. So he says that द्विविध व्याध्या शस्त्र साध्य स्नेहादि क्रिया साध्याश्च तत्र सद्य शस्त्र साध्येषु स्नेहादि क्रिया न प्रतिषिध्यते स्नेहादि क्रिया साध्येषु शस्त्र कर्म न क्रियेत. That means there are two types of the surgical disorders, that is the surgical treated, that is the shastra sadhya, and the snehadi kriya sadhya, that is the medically treatable conditions. Tatra shastra sadheshu snehadi kriya na pratishidyate. That means in the surgical disorders, the conservative management is not contraindicated. Snehadi kriya sadheshu shastra karam na kriyet. That means in the case of the medically treatable or the conservatively manageable disorders, you should not resort to the surgery. So beautiful shloka which will lay the further ground for our management. Next slide. So Acharya Sushruta has explained about the 7 types of vriddhi in Nidanstan 12th chapter, and among these 7 types of vriddhi, one is the Antarvriddhi. So this is a general shloka of the 7 types of vriddhi. Vatpitta Shleshma Shonit Med Mutra Antar Nimitha Sapt Vriddhya Tasam Mutra Nimitta Vriddhi Vat Samuthe Kevalam Utpattir Hetu Anyatam. That means there are 7 types of vriddhi, that is Vatat, Pittaj, Kafaj, Shonitaj, Medhoj, Mutraj, and Antraj. These are the 7 types. And among these 7 types, Mutra and Antra Nimitta Vriddhi Vat Samuthe Kevalam Utpattir Hetu Anyatam. That means along with the vitiation of the Mutra and Antra in these 2 types of vriddhi, there is the involvement of Vata. Next slide. So that is a repetition. Next slide, please. Then this is the Samanya Samprapti of the vriddhi. Adha prakupito anyatamo hi doshaha fal kosh vahini rapi prapadya dhamni fal koshayor vriddhi. Important is fal koshayor vriddhim janyati tam vriddhim ityachakshate. That means adha prakupita anyatamo hi dosha. That means doshas when get vitiated and they move downwards, falkosh vahini api prapadya dhamini. They enter the falkosh vahini dhamini. We can correlate it with the inguinal canal or maybe the spermatic cord. Falkoshiyor vriddhi janyati. That means it can cause, if you understand this, there is a sandhi. Falkosho means it can be unilateral or bilateral. That means the hernia can occur on one side or on the both sides simultaneously. Falkoshiyor vriddhi janyati ta vriddhim itya chakshate. So after the vitiation of dosha which has moved downwards toward the falkosha through the falkosh vahini dhamani can cause the herniation either on the one side or on the both side, and we know that hernia can occur on the both side or on the one side. Usually the congenital type of hernia can be found on or is found only on the one side, but the direct hernia is found on the both side. Bilateral occurrence of the direct hernia is more as compared to the congenital type of the hernia. Next slide, please. So this is the specific etiopathogenesis and the clinical features of the antravriddhi or the inguinal hernia explained by Acharya Sushruta. So first is the etiology. What are the causes of the hernia, inguinal hernia, according to Acharya Sushruta? भारहरन बलवद विग्रह वृक्ष प्रपतन आदि भीर आयस विशेषेर वायुर अति प्रवृद्धि. That means any of the activities which involves heavy weightlifting, bharharan, that is increase or the great straining or lifting the heavy weight. Balvad vigrah, fighting with someone who is more physically strong than you. Vriksh prapatan, that is any kind of trauma or falling from the height. Adir bhi ayas visheshesh, or activities which are having similar effect. So bharharan will ultimately, as we have read, that lifting heavy weights or straining is one of the major reason for increasing intra-abdominal pressure and leading to the acquired kind of the hernia. So very beautifully explained by Acharya Sushruta. So vayur apti pravriddhi, this will cause the vitiation of the vayu. Prakupitascha sthulantrasya cha ekadesham. That means it will cause the vitiation of the either the sthulantra or shudrantra. Vigunam adhyo adhogatva, and will cause its movement or will push the sthulantra or the shudrantra adhogatva. That means it will push it out from the abdominal cavity. Vangshan sandhim upetya, and will move it to the inguinal canal. Granthi rupen, there it will give rise to a swelling. Granthi rupen sthitva apratikriya manescha kalantre falkosham pravishyam mushak shofam apadeti. And if it is not treated in the stage where it is localized to the inguinal canal, it will ultimately descend to the mushak, that is the scrotum, and will lead to a swelling in the scrotum. Mushak shofam apadeti. Very beautifully explained the various types or the extent of the indirect hernia. If it is situated in the inguinal canal, it may be the bubinocele, or if it moves or if it is not treated in the when it is located in the inguinal canal, it will move to the scrotum and will lead ultimately to the complete scrotal or the vaginal hernia. So various extent of the hernia has been described by Acharya Sushruta very beautifully. Then now he is going on to the explanation of the clinical features. Admato bhastiri vatat pradhirg shofa bhavti. That means it will cause the distension and it will give a feeling that a bladder has been filled by the air. Now by air, it means that the contents are mostly the intestine, that is the enterocele, because intestine is filled with the air. So he is talking about the enterocele here. Pradhirg shofo bhavti, and give rise to a huge swelling over there. And we know by our clinical experiences that the complete scrotal hernias are huge if they contain the intestine. Now going to the clinical examination, Acharya Sushruta explains, Sashabdam avpirtascho urdham upeti vimuktascha punar admayet tam antravriddhim asadhyam itya chakshate. That means when you press the hernial sac, that means Sashabdam avpirtascha urdham upeti. That means the hernia will move upwards. That means it will reduce with a gurgling sound. And we know that when the enterocele, that is when the hernia contains the momentum, is reduced, and once it enters the abdominal cavity, it enters with a gurgling sound because it contains the air. So here, Sa Shabdam Avpirtascha Urdhvam Upeti Vimuktascha Punaradmayet. That means if you have reduced, it will enter with a gurgling sound. But if it is let loose, that the person will continue to do his or her activities, it will appear again. That means again it will herniate. So this is very beautifully explained by Acharya Sushruta, just like our present understanding of the hernia. Tam antram asadhyam ityachakshate, and this kind of vriddhi was asadhya at that time. Next slide, please. So in the previous slide, we have discussed the etiology, pathology, clinical examination, clinical features, and the prognosis of the disorders. But even though Acharya Sushruta has told that it is asadhya, still depending upon the extent and the chronicity of the disease, Acharya Sushruta had tried to suggest a certain kind of management. So according to Acharya Sushruta, first he says that you have to tell the patient that it is not treatable. Tadyad varjya antra hetukim. But still he says that aprapt fal koshayam vat vriddhi kramohita. That means if the hernia has not entered into the scrotum, if the hernia is still a bubinocele, or if it is located to the inguinal canal, it may be a direct hernia which is localized to the inguinal canal, or it may be a bubinocele. At that time, vat vriddhi kramohita, you have to follow the treatment principles of the vat vriddhi, which are listed on the right side of your screen. That is tatra adito vat vriddho travrit snigdham aturam swinnam chan yatha nyaye pyayet virechanam. That means what we are doing in vat vriddhi has to be done in the antravriddhi. And what was that? Travrit snigdham aturam, the patient should be given trivrit sneh swinnam chan yatha nyayam pyayet virechanam. And then after giving this snehana, Swedanan should be done, and as per the principles of the Sanshodhana, Virechana should be done. Followed by that, Koshamram Tilvak Eranda Fel Tela Ni Vanaram Sakshiram Va Piben Masam Telam Eranda Sambhav. Then the patient should be given Koshamra Tilvak or Eranda Fal Tel, or patient should be given Eranda Tel for 1 month along with the milk. That means the patient, he's trying to basically do is to treat the chronic constipation of the patient. He's trying to do the Vatanuloman so that the patient does not have to strain while the defecation, or his constipation has to be treated, because we know that basically the cause for strangulation or the obstruction is the hard feces or the chronic constipation. So here he is trying to do the Kostashodhana Vatanulomana, by which the free movement or the ease of the passing of stools is made to the patient. Then tat kale anilagnanam kwathe kalakascha buddhiman niruhe. Then those kalka and kwatha should be administered to the patient via niruhu, which are vat shamak and cha bhuktvantam rasodhanam. And after niruhu basti yan nirudam cha bhuktvantam rasodhanam, after performing of the niruhu basti, patient should be given rasodhanam. That means masras should be given. Yashti maduk siddhen tatastelen yoje. Then the anuvasan vasti should be given with the yashti madhu siddhatel. So this is the principal management or the principles of management of those kind of hernias which are located in the inguinal canal. Either it can be a bubinocele or it can be a direct inguinal hernia. Then coming back to the shloka on the left side, apraptam fal koshayam vat vriddhi kramohita tatraya vangshanstham ta dahed ardhendru vakreya samyak avrodhartham kosh praptam tu varjet. As we know that Acharya Sushruta has said that you should first try to arrest the hernia at the inguinal canal, because apratikriya mane will result the hernia to enter into the scrotum. So he is here trying to basically occlude the path of the hernia from inguinal canal to the scrotum. So here he is saying that tatra vankshnas tatham ta dahed ardhendru vakreya samyak avrodhartham kosh praptam tu varjet. That means you should do the Agni Karma with ardhendu vakra shlaka. Ardhendu vakra shlaka is that kind of shlaka which is having its tip in the shape of a semi-lunar shape or semicircular shape. That means it will have two prongs. This is very beautiful explanation of Acharya Sushruta, that he is trying to do Agni Karma in a single sting at two sides. That means by just one application you are trying to cause the fibrosis or exterization at the 2 points, which may be deep inguinal ring and the superficial inguinal ring, so that samyak avrodhartham kosh praptam tu varjet, so that because of the effect of the Agni Karma, there may be some kind of fibrosis which may further prevent the hernia to descend into the scrotum or to prevent it from becoming into a complete kind of hernia. Then त्वचा भित्वाम अंगुष्ठ मध्यम दहेच अंग विपर्यात अनेनेन वा विधानेन वृद्धि वात कफात्मिका. Then what you have to do, these are some radical points which Acharya Sushruta has said and are points for the future research. What त्वचा भित्वाम अंगुष्ठ मध्यम दहेच अंग विपर्यात, that means you have to incise the skin in the middle of the thumb of the foot of the opposite side. That means if the hernia is of left side, you have to incise the skin of the thumb in the middle and then do the Agni Karma there. That means for the right side, you have to do on the left side, and for the left side, you have to do on the right side. Anenin vidhanin vriddhi vaat kafatmike pradehet prayata kintu snayu chedo adhikasto. Now here he is referring to the vaat kafa's type of vriddhi, where the same procedure has to be felt, but the snayu chedana has to be a bit more than that of the antarvriddhi. Then shankho aparicha karnante तयक्त्वा यतनेन सेविनाम वयत साध्या शिरा विद्येर अंतर्वृद्धि निवृत्ते. Then he is saying that you have to perform the Sira Vedhin at the Shankopari, above the Shank Pradesh and at the suture line at the end of the ear. This mostly relates to the Sira Vedhin from the posterior auricular vein or the superficial temporal vein by our present knowledge of anatomy, though we don't practice it in the routine. So these were the principles of management of the inguinal hernia by Acharya Sushruta, where he was basically trying to treat the constipation of the patient so that the patient does not have to strain much while passing the stools. Also, he was making an attempt to arrest the descent of the hernia from the inguinal region into the scrotal region. And if the hernia has entered into the scrotum region, then he was trying to resort to certain radical methods like Agni Karma in the thumb and the Sira Vedan in the Shankopari Karnante Sevani Pradesh. Next slide, please. So, to conclude, hernia is basically a surgical disorder which should always be operated under feasible circumstances because every hernia carries the risk of strangulation. Obstruction and strangulations are surgical emergencies which should be immediately taken care of. Emergence of novel coronavirus and unsuitable subjects demand approaches for delaying of the surgery or the conservative management. Here, definitely, we Ayurvedic surgeons and Ayurvedic clinicians can help the patient, and conservative management of surgical disorders, as described in our Ayurvedic texts, needs more attention and I will say more research, as we have just gone through that the role of Sira and the role of the Agni Karma in the Antarvriddhi. That's it. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for taking your time for preparing and giving us such an extraordinary and wonderful presentation, which was incredibly informative. We will now go ahead to the question and answer session. Shall we begin, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
We have question from Dr. Rajeshwari.
Yes.
What can be compared to cholelithiasis with mucocele according to Ayurveda and its management?
Okay. So basically, cholelithiasis, every Ayurvedic doctor has a different view to this. I'll talk about myself. Basically, I approach the patient of cholelithiasis on the basis upon the presentation. At moments, cholelithiasis, if it is symptomatic at that time, what I prefer is to go for the what is our standard modern treatment protocol, that is to prescribe the analgesics, antibiotics, and once the inflammation has subsided, to operate the patient. And if the patient comes with an incidental finding of the gallstone and we is not having any symptoms, then we treat the patient on the basis of simple medication like Arogya Vardhani and the Kumariasaf. Specifically, we say there is no direct comparison between the cholelithiasis or any other Ayurvedic. Certain people compare this with the Pitta Shul, but I don't buy this thought. And mucocele is not clearly described as per my knowledge in our Ayurvedic text. It is the finding of the USG only.
Okay, sir. Moving on to next question. What are the Ayurvedic analgesics you give post-operatively?
Post-operatively, what we have been treating the patients, if we are not having put the mesh, then we are giving simple Triflaguglu, Gandhagrasayan and Asnadikwa. We have also carried out work on the Matra Basti using the Balatel, and that was having a brilliant result in the post-operative management of the pain. Actually, the post-operative pain is cause of the surgical technique which you follow while performing the surgery. If more of the sharp instruments or the fine dissection has been performed during the surgery, definitely the patient will be having more pain. But if you try to limit the amount of these handling of the tissues by the instruments, the post-operative pain can be reduced considerably by the technique. So when we were performing this hernia surgeries, we used more of the finger dissection rather than using the arteries and the scissors. So that only caused the reduction in the pain post-operatively if we have resorted to more use of the electrocautery or the sharp instruments. But we have been using this Balatel Matra Basti in post-operative period once the patient has started passing these tools, and it was having a very good result. But where the condition demands, we resort to the modern analgesics too.
Okay, sir. Thank you. We have a question from Dr. Kritika. Ma'am, can you please unmute yourself? Hello, Dr.
Good
Kritika.
evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, ma'am.
So thank you so much for such a elaborated lecture, and
Thank you.
congratulations to all the surgeon fraternity in Ayurveda, as we have all got through the implementation of the surgical processes. Sir, my question is that being in OPD level, where would we draw a line to treat the umbilical hernia and inguinal hernia if we sort it out according to the degree of its clinical practices, where we should draw a line, we should interfere or not? We normally give Ridvadika Vati Kanchanar, but is there any clinical experience from your side, or you have been more into surgical?
Ma'am, frankly saying that I have not seen any much benefit of Kanchanar and the Vriddhivartika Vati, especially in the case of the hernias. Though Vriddhivartika Vati and Kanchanar has given mild results in the case of the secondary hydroceles in my clinical practice. Whereas in my clinical practice, how do I approach to the patients of inguinal hernia and where I do take the patient to the OT directly is that if the patient comes to me with the case of a direct hernia, at that time I will try to postpone the surgery if patient is not willing by using our Ayurvedic medications, which will allow patient the ease of passing of the stools, because we know that it is the constipation or the hard stool which is the culprit behind causing the obstruction in the case of the hernia. Same applies to the inguinal hernia also, which is an indirect type of the inguinal hernia. So if patient comes to me who is not having strangulation or who is not having obstruction, that means the patient with the reducible hernia can be easily treated, and the patient with the direct hernia can be easily treated with our routine medications, which will prevent the constipation. But if the patient, I suspect, is having intestinal obstruction or there is irreducibility, at that time I suggest the surgery. Then it is left to the patient's consent whether he is ready for the surgery or not. If the patient is not ready for the surgery, and I know the patient is not going to get operated by anyone, at that time I continue with my same management and give a word of caution to the patient that if the following symptoms, like immediately if the hernia becomes immediately all of a sudden it becomes tender, it becomes tense, you have to come to us immediately without a delay. And by giving these word of cautions, we can continue to treat the patient comfortably in our clinical practices.
Right, sir. And so what about the umbilical hernia? Like, is there a line drawn by the surgical context that this much centimeter should be taken in account? Otherwise, as a surgeon, you would say it needs surgery only. But people are very reluctant in our OPDs. They don't want, they say, nahi, aap isko continue kariye, maybe another 3 months we will see. Or whatever you have said, constipation, tenderness, all these have to be taken care.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, there is a clear-cut indication in literature only that when the umbilical hernia should be operated and when it should not be operated. If it is a case of a baby who is coming right after the birth, we have to decide what degree of umbilical hernia he or she is having, whether it is exomphalos major or exomphalos minor. If it is a case of the exomphalos major, where is a big defect and the intestines are coming outside the abdominal cavity, at that time we need to take the patient immediately to the surgery, because it can lead to ultimately perforation by the mishandling of the child. But if it is a case of the exomphalos minor, the text itself says that for the 15 months, if you can treat the patient by truss and you do not allow the hernia to come out, that is, if you can keep it in a reduced state by application of truss, it will heal on its own because of the formation of the adhesion. So this is the clear cut indication. At that time, what our attempt is that we should try to prevent the conditions like cough in patient or the child, so that the child does not develop any kind of serious cough. So that, because if the child will cough too much, it will increase the intra-abdominal pressure and will ultimately undo the effect of the truss which has been applied with the intent to cause the adhesions by allowing the hernia to remain in the state of the reducibility. But if it is a case of exomphalos major, definitely we have to treat. And similarly, if it is an adult
Yeah.
who is coming with paraumbilical hernia, the
Mhm.
principle would be immediate or the surgery at the earliest, because umbilical hernias are also tend to strangulate because the abdominal musculature is very strong at its borders of the neck.
So what you do in case the umbilical hernia has a history of patient is having cardiac or overweight, highly obese, PMS symptoms. Patient is very sensitive. Also, I have my relative for the last, I suppose, 7 to 8 years. She has been pending off this surgery. Weight is highly on the higher side, like, and she's a cardiac
M-
postmenopausal symptoms also.
Ma'am, there
As
is a
soon as
very
she goes for it, her hypertension increases. She's never entered ever into OTs for this fear only. I mean, medicine only she tried.
okay. Ma'am, there is a underlying principle in every surgery when to operate and when not to operate. What line I follow is that we have to outweigh the benefits against the risks. If I think the benefit of not performing surgery is more, and there will be any kind of mortality intraoperatively or postoperatively, then I try to forego the surgery and I leave the decision with my anesthetist. If anesthetist believe that the patient can be easily induced or without any complications, the patient can be induced for the anesthesia, then we take patient for the surgery. But as you said, if the patient is having huge weight, if the patient is highly hypertensive, is on aspirin or some other drugs, then we try to wait, or we try or advise the patient to improve the general health by reducing the weight, by exercising and all those. But if still the patient does not this benefits by these management, then we will just wait and watch. If the hernia anyways turn to strangulation, then we have to operate it.
Okay, okay.
Don't have any price. If the hernia does
Right,
not
sir.
strangulate,
Thank you.
then thank you.
Thank you so much for your information. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to next question from Dr. Kiran. Do you use Vriddhi Vatika Vati? Vriddhi Vatika
Frankly,
Vati.
no, I don't use this Riddhivatika Vati in the hernias, though I sometimes I prefer to use Riddhivatika in the case of the inflammatory hydrocele, but not in the hernia. I don't use Riddhivatika. I simply use Godanti Havipati Garchuran in the normal practice. If the patient is not too much constipated, and if patient is too much constipated, I use Gandharvastadi Erantel for the ease of the movements of the stools.
Sir, thank you. Next question from Dr. Niranjan Kumar. Why scrotal support is given?
Okay. There are two major reasons of use of the scrotal support. First reason is that sometimes what happens after the surgery, there is tendency, if the scrotum is allowed to remain in the normal position, the secretions may occur and it may lead to accumulation of the fluid inside the scrotum. So we give the scrotal support. Also, what happens at most of the times, because there is a continuous stretch on the scrotum after post-operative period, the patient may have this appreciation of the pain in the scrotal areas. That also is subsided with the scrotal support, because it will put pressure and will keep the testis in an elevated position. And also at times we have seen there are reported incidents in the literature that there is increased chances of the torsion of testes after the reduction of the inguinal hernia. So that is also reason that the scrotal support is given. The major reason is to prevent any accumulation of the fluid inside the lax scrotal sac.
Sir. Moving on to next question from Sunil Kumar. Any experience of application of dried earthworm or tobacco water?
No, I don't have any experience of this dried earthworm or tobacco water in this my practice. I don't this.
Okay. Next question from Dr. Jagriti. In initial stage of inguinal hernia, which medicines can be prescribed?
I have told there is variety of medications depending upon the stage of the patient. You can give the normal Trifla you can give Godanti Avipattikar, you can give Gandharvesta, the erand tail, you can give Nityam tablets or any medication which you feel can prevent the constipation in the patient. And also what I am, it is not just about the constipation. If the patient is having BPH, you have to treat the patient's BPH. Also the modern textbooks also saying that if the patient comes to you with tuberculosis, or the patient comes of the hernia comes to you with BPH, or uh, urinary outlet obstruction, or chronic cough, whooping cough, you have to first treat those conditions, because if you directly take the patient to the surgery for the right side of the hernia, then if the patient is still having the earlier predisposing disease which has caused the herniation, then the patient will have the hernia of the other side. So you have to treat the depending on the clinical situation. If the patient comes with the constipation, history of constipation, you have to treat the constipation. If the patient comes with the history of chronic cough, you have to treat the chronic cough. If it is BPH, you have to treat the BPH. If it is any stricture urethra, you have to treat the stricture urethra accordingly. So there is not one what you say fundamental or simple medications, that principle of medication you have to give. You have to treat on the clinical presentation of the patient. You have to take the history and see if the patient has a history of heavy straining, then you have to tell the patient that you should avoid heavy strenuous exercises or heavy strenuous work.
Okay, sir, we have a question from Surya Narayana. Uh, can you please unmute, sir? Hello, Dr. Surya Narayana. Moving on to next question. What is the exact indication of mesh, and when prostate
Doctor, 1 minute. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Sri Lakshmi Garu. Can I speak to Dr. Surgeon?
Yes, you can.
Doctor, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Sir, if once undergone this meshplasty of hernia, the
Yes, sir.
lifespan, how many, the duration of lifespan of that?
For what mesh? For the mesh,
Yes, sir.
the mesh has no as such duration. It can be kept for the lifelong. Only it has to be removed if the patient develops any infection at the site. If because of any reaction to the mesh, patient develops wound infection, or if there is any hematoma, then only the mesh has to be removed. Otherwise, mesh can be kept for the lifelong, and it is the most gold standard treatment these days.
Okay. In umbilical hernia, in the Bala, the young patients, is meshplasty is required, or surgical ligating
No,
is the best
no,
way
it is
approach?
not. It is not required. The mesh plasty is usually not required in the case of the infants. If it is an exomphalos minor, you just have to reduce the hernia. You have to perform the herniotomy, and you have to close the gap by the interrupted sutures. But if it is a big defect, then what we do sometimes we raise the sleeve of the muscle from the other side. We give an incision also on the left side of the muscle, and will move that or stretch the muscle to cover the defect. But if in case then also we are not able to cover the defect, at that time we can consider using any autogenous or the heterologous material for the obliteration of the defect.
Doctor, in the first stage of hernia appearance, can we go for an ancient approach like some of asanas is advising headstand posture or some asanas, and after taking much food do not walk, and all this can work, or only it is
No.
utopia?
If it is an initial stage, if it is a direct hernia, then definitely we can do all these conservative managements which can cure the general health of the patient and will remove the disorder which is causing the hernia. For example, if patient is having cough, chronic cough, we can definitely tell the patient to do certain kind of pranayam so that his cough can be improved. Similarly, if patient is having any other disorder like BPH or any urinary outlet obstruction, we can tell the patient or give the conservative medications for the treatment of the BPH. It's not that immediately you have to take the patient. Definitely, you have to tell the patient that when to come in emergency, but you can continue to treat the patient till the patient feels so, and if you feel so, that can be improved. It cannot be cured. Inguinal hernia cannot be cured conservatively. That is the underlying line.
Okay, 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 doctor. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
sir. Moving on to next question. What is the exact indication of mesh and when prostate enlargement is associated with hernia, which should be treated first?
When the prostate enlargement is associated with the hernia, definitely the prostate enlargement should be treated first, because if the prostate enlargement is not treated and the surgery is done, then the patient may develop recurrence. Okay, the recurrence can be on the same side or it can be on the other side. Then coming to the indications of the mesh, there are two general indications. Nowadays, every patient is being treated with the mesh by the surgeons, but the text says that are two indications. First indication is the recurrent hernia. Supposingly, earlier the patient was operated for inguinal hernia with the herniorrhaphy. That means by the reinforced repair by suturing the conjoined tendon with the inguinal ligament. But the patient has developed the hernia again. Then mesh has to be done. Other is that if the patient is elderly and you think that his posterior wall muscles are not in a good strength to provide the permanent obliteration, then also you have to put the mesh. And then third indication is the direct hernia. In direct hernia, because the defect is large and the posterior wall itself is weak, then also mesh is given or mesh is placed in the surgery. So these are the three indications. First is the recurrence. If by earlier the patient was treated by herniorrhaphy and the patient develops recurrence, then the mesh has to be placed. If the patient is elderly, then mesh also has to be placed. And then last is if it is a direct hernia, then also the mesh has to be placed.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Next question. What Ayurveda medicines you suggest to prevent asthmatic attacks in post-operative period?
Okay, what Ayurvedic medications I use to prevent the asthmatic? Frankly saying, I don't give in the early post-operative phase. I don't give any Ayurvedic medications to prevent the asthmatic attack. I proceed with the modern line of management. Either it can be Darifeline intravenous or using the pumps. I don't take the risk in the early post-operative phase to treat the asthmatic patient with the what you say Ayurvedic drugs, because if the patient develops irretractable cough, then it may lead to the ruptures of the suture lines. So I don't take this risk.
Okay, sir. Next question from Dr. Anju. Which exercise can lead to hernia?
Any exercise which causes increase in intra-abdominal pressure. It can be weightlifting, barbells, or any other exercise in which you have to strain and you feel that the it is putting pressure on your abdomen. You have to avoid those, or you have to do with the proper technique under proper supervision.
Thank you, sir. Next question from Dr. Fasana. Ayurveda medicines for reducible hernia in clinical practice and duration.
I have already told that for reducible hernia, Ayurvedic medications cannot be just three or four. It depends upon the cause which is causing the hernia. Okay. So if it is cough, you have to treat the cough. If it is constipation, you have to treat the constipation. And you can choose accordingly. The list is long. So you have to choose depending upon the clinical condition. But my principle is that you have to avoid the constipation and you have to treat the other disorder which has caused the hernia. It can be asthma, you can give any Shwaskuthar. It can be BPH. You can go with your Vasu's product, your all BPH, or your this Ayurvedic medicines, Kanchanar Chandraprabha, or any other which medicines you want to give. It depends upon the clinical condition which has caused the hernia or which can aggravate the hernia.
Next question from Dr. Ashima. Does Agni Karma has any role in hernia?
Okay, this is a very beautiful question. As if now I don't have any data to give it commandingly that yes, this Agni Karma has a role in hernia. What I have done in past 4 5 months, I have made a protocol for my clinical practice that patient with direct hernia who complains of pain, or the patient who has a reducible kind of hernia who complains of pain, in that patient I am trying and I am doing this Agni Karma. The data is very small, so I cannot say commandingly, but yes, I have seen that the pain decreases after the this Agni Karma. That can be because of the inhibition of the pain receptors as per the gate theory of pain control. The data needs to be more vast before we can say it commandingly. Yes, hernia, Agni Karma in hernia works. But yes, 2 or 3 patients in which I have tried, there is reduction in the pain, the dragging kind of pain or discomfort which patient used to tell, that decreases considerably. But that should be done under supervision, that the hernia is not a reducible, because if the hernia is reducible or it is an inflamed hernia and you do the Agni, if you, for example, if a patient comes to you and without performing the proper clinical examination and diagnosis, you proceed with the Agni Karma. So if it is a kind of inflamed hernia, then it will aggravate the condition. It will worsen the patient's condition if you do the Agni Karma over an inflamed hernia or a strangulated hernia. But if it is a reducible hernia, it is not associated with any other localized inflammation. In that, you can do Agni Karma, but under supervision. I will suggest this.
Okay, sir, we have a question related to the same site of Agni Karma.
It is simple. What I prefer, Acharya has not told exact. He has said the hey the Ardhendu Vakre Shlaka. We can understand because has used this special kind of Shlaka, Ardhendu Vakra Shlaka. That means one which is having semi lunar or semi circular shape. So here one probe I put on the deep inguinal ring and other on the superficial inguinal ring. I adjust that length and then I give the Agni Karma over that point.
Yes, sir. Next question. From
That is what
Dr.
I practice. Others have can their own modifications.
Okay, sir. Next question. Is Indukanta Gridam indicated?
There is nothing like indication. Acharya Sushruta has not said Indukanta Ghritam. Acharya Vagbhata has told Sukumar Tel. Okay, so Indukanta Ghritam has not been directly told for the this Vriddhi as per my knowledge. But yes, Indukanta Grita helps in prevention of constipation, Vatan Loman. It does Vatan. It can be given for crude constipation. Grita is, I practice Grita in patients which have crude costa. I give Gritas,
Okay, sir. Next
but I prefer
question.
Sukumara Grita.
Okay, sir. Next question. What would you suggest for post-operative hiccups?
As I have told for the asthma, if the patient comes with the, if patient develops asthma in the early post-operative period, I will resort to the allopathic medicine. Similarly, for the hiccups, if it is early post-operative period, I will give patient tablet baclofen for the treatment. I will not, baclofen 10 mg will treat the patient's hiccups.
Okay, sir. That's all for the questions. Shall we wind up, sir?
As you feel comfortable, ma'am, it's fine for myself.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for answering all the questions. I request Dr. K. Vadivukarsi, ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of Kriya Sharira, Ayurveda College, Coimbatore, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Very good evening, one and all. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Ayurveda College Coimbatore and my own behalf, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this webinar a grand success. First and foremost, it's my privilege to thank today's guest speaker, Dr. Sukrant Sharma, for a thought-provoking and interesting session. We have been fortunate enough to have an eminent personality with us here. The clinical experiences and understanding the field shows a depth of knowledge in the subject. The ability to present the topic in such an interesting way is one of the most memorable evening for all of us. Thank you, sir. As no progress can become successful with a single person, so I extend my thanks to our whole Ayurveda College family, their support and teamwork. We are all most grateful to all the guests and participants here. We thank you all for being with us this evening. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, ma'am. We have come to the end of the session. Sunsets are proof that no matter what happens, every day ends beautifully. Thank you so much, sir, for giving this wonderful session. See you all in next session on 16th of December on the topic A View on COVID-19, Comorbidities, Post-COVID Complications and Preventive Care by Dr. Asha S.A., Assistant Professor, Department of PG Studies in Swasthavritta, Government Ayurveda Medical College, Mysore, Karnataka. To know more about our updates, please do stay connected with our social platform. That's all for today's most interesting session with lot of new information for us to close our eyes with thought-provoking knowledge. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.